Chapter 91. The bright morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the War Ministry's grand conference room. The walls were lined with military banners, and the polished oak table in the center reflected the stern faces of the generals seated around it. Matthew Hesh walked into the room, his shoes clicking softly on the marble floor, his posture straight but calm. This was a meeting he had been waiting for, a chance to hear firsthand how his creations had performed in the heat of battle. General Nathaniel Warner stood to greet him, his imposing figure commanding the room. Around the table sat a collection of high-ranking officers, their crisp uniforms adorned with medals and insignias. Among them was General Henry Caldwell, known for his logistical expertise, and Brigadier General Samuel Grant, whose reputation as a tactician was well established. "Mr. Hesh," Warner said, extending a firm hand, "welcome, your timing couldn't be better. We've just finished reviewing the battlefield reports." Matthew shook Warner's hand, his face betraying a hint of eagerness. "General, it's a privilege to be here. I'm anxious to hear how the weapons and vehicles performed." "Take a seat," Warner said, motioning to the chair directly across from him. "We have much to discuss." Matthew settled into his chair, his leather briefcase resting by his side. The table was cluttered with maps, documents, and after-action reports, evidence of a military command deep in the throes of planning. Warner opened a folder in front of him and cleared his throat. "The Hesh Model 85 bolt-action rifle," Warner began, "has been nothing short of a game-changer. Our soldiers reported unprecedented accuracy, and the increased range has allowed us to engage the enemy well before they can respond. Entire skirmishes have been decided before the Mexicans could even close the distance." Brigadier General Grant leaned forward. "The precision has been extraordinary. One unit managed to hold a defensive position against 3 times their number. They credit the rifles for the decisive advantage." Matthew nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That's excellent to hear. And the machine guns?" Warner's expression grew even more serious. "Devastating. The Hesh Model 85 automatic guns have turned defensive positions into fortresses. Entire cavalry charges have been stopped dead in their tracks. It's like nothing we've ever seen." General Caldwell, who had been flipping through a report, added, "The enemy is in complete disarray. They have no counter to the machine guns, and their antiquated muskets are proving useless against our firepower." Matthew's satisfaction was tempered by curiosity. "And the vehicles? How have the automobiles been integrated?" At this, the room fell silent for a moment. Warner exchanged a glance with Caldwell before speaking. "The automobiles are performing adequately for transport," Warner said carefully. "They've replaced horse-drawn wagons for moving supplies, but what?" Matthew asked, leaning forward slightly. "But," Warner continued, "they're being used as little more than faster wagons. They're restricted to the speed of the marching infantry to maintain formation. While they're efficient, they haven't revolutionized the battlefield the way the weapons have." Matthew frowned, his disappointment evident. "General, these vehicles weren't designed to crawl behind marching soldiers. They're capable of so much more. Stay updated via Novelbin." The generals shifted in their seats. Brigadier General Grant spoke up. "We've had difficulty adapting our tactics to incorporate the vehicles effectively. The logistics of fuel, maintenance, and terrain navigation have posed challenges." Matthew leaned back, his fingers steepled as he considered their words. "Gentlemen, with all due respect, you're thinking too traditionally. These automobiles aren't just substitutes for wagons, they're tools that can redefine the way battles are fought." The room grew quiet as Matthew stood, moving to a large map pinned to the far wall. He picked up a pointer and began to outline his ideas. "Let's start with mobility," Matthew said. "Your infantry is limited by how far they can march in a day. With automobiles, you can transport troops to the front lines in hours, not days. Imagine reinforcing a vulnerable position before the enemy even knows it's under threat." He tapped a point on the map, indicating a potential route. "Second, use the vehicles for reconnaissance. Equip lighter models with radios and light armaments. They can scout ahead, identify enemy positions, and relay information back to command in real time." "Radios? What's that?" Matthew Gulpede had unintentionally slipped a technology that hadn't been introduced in this era. He quickly adjusted, maintaining his composure. "Forgive me, gentlemen," he said, leaning forward. "I meant wireless telegrams. A system where messages can be transmitted over long distances without the need for physical wires. Think of it as an evolution of your current telegraph system." The room grew quiet as the generals processed his words. General Caldwell furrowed his brow, clearly intrigued. "Wireless telegrams? Are you suggesting a portable means of communication for the battlefield?" Matthew nodded, seizing the opportunity to elaborate. Precisely, General, imagine this. Your commanders in the field can communicate directly with headquarters or with other units, no matter the distance. Orders, reconnaissance reports, or calls for reinforcements could be sent in real time. This would eliminate delays caused by messengers or fixed telegraph lines. Warner leaned back in his chair, his interest piqued. And how would this system work? Do you have such technology ready? Matthew chose his words carefully, knowing he was treading into uncharted territory for this era. The foundation for wireless communication exists, with some development. I can design portable transmitters and receivers that can operate reliably on the battlefield. It won't be instantaneous to implement, but the potential benefits are immense. Grant tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. If this works, it could change how we conduct warfare, but the question remains, how long would it take to produce such devices and at what cost? Matthew spread his hands. Development will take months, perhaps longer, but once the initial prototypes are perfected, mass production can begin. As for the cost, I assure you it will be an investment worth every florin. The ability to coordinate your forces with unparalleled speed and accuracy would more than make up for the expense. Caldwell interjected. We'd need to train officers and soldiers in its use as well. This would be a significant shift in how we operate. That's true, Matthew agreed, but every major advancement requires adaptation. You've already seen what happens when superior technology meets outdated tactics. The enemy is left scrambling. Wireless telegrams would ensure that you're always one step ahead. Warner exchanged a glance with Caldwell, then turned back to Matthew. Your ideas are bold, Mr. Hesh, bold, but not without merit. If you can provide us with a working prototype within a reasonable time frame, well, consider integrating this technology into our strategy. Matthew smiled faintly, sensing he had regained their confidence. It'll make it my top priority. In the meantime, I'd like to revisit the current use of automobiles. Warner raised an eyebrow. You're not letting that go, are you? Not at all, General, Matthew replied with a hint of humor. If you want to maximize their effectiveness, we need to think beyond transport. For instance, a convoy of armed vehicles could escort supply wagons or even flank enemy positions during an assault. They'd provide mobile firepower and protection in ways traditional methods cannot. Caldwell leaned forward, nodding, and with wireless communication, those vehicles could coordinate with infantry and artillery more efficiently. Exactly, Matthew said, his enthusiasm growing. It's about integration, your infantry, vehicles, and artillery working together as a cohesive unit. That's how you dominate the battlefield. Warner rubbed his chin thoughtfully. You're proposing a significant shift in how we approach warfare. It won't be easy, but I see the potential. Grant added, it's clear your innovations have already given us the edge. If you can deliver on wireless telegrams and improve the implementation of vehicles, we might truly be unstoppable. Matthew stood, extending his hand to Warner. Then let me get to work. I'll provide you with designs, prototypes, and whatever else you need to bring these ideas to life. Warner clasped his hand firmly. We're counting on you, Hesh. The Republic's future might just depend on it. Chapter 92. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the sprawling grounds of Hesh Industries as Matthew returned to his workshop. He had left the War Ministry with a clear mission: to bring his ideas for wireless telegrams and more efficient battlefield vehicles to life. The faint hum of activity in the factory greeted him, a constant reminder of the work that never ceased. Matthew entered his private workshop, a spacious room filled with blueprints, mechanical parts, and half-assembled prototypes. His lead engineer, Robert Anders, was already waiting for him, scribbling notes on a clipboard. Robert, Matthew said as he shrugged off his coat. We have a lot to do. Robert looked up. Let me guess, more ideas from the military? Not just ideas, Matthew replied, walking over to his workbench and unrolling a fresh sheet of drafting paper. Direct feedback and new demands. The generals are thrilled with the performance of the rifles and machine guns, but they're underusing the automobiles. They're treating them like glorified wagons. Robert frowned. That doesn't sound like a smart use of what we've built. It's not, Matthew said firmly, and it's up to us to show them how to use these vehicles effectively. But there's more. I need to develop a system for wireless telegrams, portable communication devices for the battlefield. Robert's eyebrows shot up. Wireless communication? That's ambitious, even for you. Matthew smiled faintly. Ambitious? Yes, but necessary. Imagine troops being able to relay orders or call for reinforcements instantly, without relying on runners or fixed telegraph lines. It could change everything. Robert scratched his head. clearly intrigued but cautious. Do you have any idea where to start with that? I have some concepts, Matthew said, pulling out a notebook filled with rough sketches and notes. We'll need to experiment with electromagnetic waves and build a prototype transmitter and receiver. It won't be easy, but if we succeed, it'll be revolutionary. Robert nodded slowly. And the vehicles? We need to rethink their role entirely, Matthew explained. Instead of just moving supplies, they should be integral to combat armed convoys, rapid troop transport, reconnaissance capable of so much more. Robert tapped his pencil against the clipboard, his mind already racing. That means modifying the vehicles. Reinforced armor, mounted weapons, better engines for speed and endurance. Exactly, Matthew said. And I want to create a demonstration for the military, show them what these vehicles can do when used strategically. Robert grinned. You always aim high, Matt. Let's get to work. The two men dove into the task, their focus unwavering. Matthew sketched designs for a wireless transmitter, while Robert began drafting blueprints for modified vehicles. The workshop buzzed with activity as they collaborated, their energy fueled by the vision of a more advanced battlefield. A week later, Matthew stood in the testing field behind the factory. Before him were two modified automobiles, their sleek frames now reinforced with steel plates and mounted with light machine guns. One vehicle bore an experimental wireless transmitter, its antenna extending high into the air. Robert joined him, holding a clipboard and looking pleased with their progress. The modifications are ready, and the transmitter is operational, at least in theory. Matthew nodded. Good. Let's see what they can do. He signaled to the test drivers, who climbed into the vehicles and started the engines. The machines roared to life, their new engines more powerful and responsive than before. The first vehicle sped across the field, its mounted guns swiveling to target practice dummies set up in the distance. The gunner opened fire, the machine gun rattling as it shredded the targets with ease. The second vehicle demonstrated the transmitter. A nearby technician sent a message from a portable receiver, and moments later a light on the transmitter flashed, signaling successful communication. It works, Robert said, a note of awe in his voice. It's a start, Matthew replied, though he allowed himself a small smile. But we're not done yet. I want these vehicles to be faster and more versatile, and the communication range needs to be extended. As the tests continued, Matthew's mind buzzed with possibilities. He could already imagine fleets of these vehicles on the battlefield, coordinating attacks and relaying vital information. The potential was limitless, and he was determined to see it realized. 2 days later, Matthew returned to the War Ministry with his prototypes and test results in tow. General Warner and his staff gathered in the courtyard to witness the demonstration. The mood was one of cautious optimism. The generals had seen Matthew's innovations succeed before, but this was uncharted territory. Read exclusive content at novelbin.com. Matthew stepped forward, addressing the assembled officers. Gentlemen, what you're about to see is a glimpse of the future. These vehicles are not just transport, they are tools of strategy and power, and this transmitter represents the next step in battlefield communication. He motioned to the first vehicle, which roared to life and sped across the courtyard. The driver executed sharp turns and sudden stops, showcasing the machine's agility. The gunner fired at mock targets, the mounted weapon proving its accuracy and firepower. The second vehicle demonstrated the wireless telegram. A technician sent a message from a receiver positioned at the far end of the courtyard, and the transmitter responded instantly. The generals murmured among themselves, clearly impressed. Warner stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. This is impressive, Hesh. These vehicles could indeed change how we approach warfare, and the communication system, how far can it reach? Currently, only a few miles, Matthew admitted, but with further refinement, I believe we can extend that range significantly. Brigadier General Grant nodded. The potential is undeniable. If we can coordinate our forces in real time, it would give us an unmatched advantage. Warner turned to Matthew, his tone firm but approving. You've exceeded expectations once again, Mr. Hesh. Well, support the development of these technologies, but time is of the essence. Can you deliver quickly? Matthew met his gaze without hesitation. I'll work day and night if I have to, General. You have my word. As the demonstration concluded, Matthew felt a surge of determination. The path ahead was challenging, but the rewards were immense. With the Republic's support, his innovations could shape the future of warfare and secure victory on the battlefield. Chapter 93. The factory floor was alive with activity as Matthew Hesh walked between rows of workers and engineers. The sound of machinery clanging and engines roaring filled the air, accompanied by the occasional hum of generators powering the newest prototypes. The scene was one of relentless progress, exactly what Matthew wanted. Robert Anders approached, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. His face bore a look of cautious excitement. The first batch of modified vehicles is nearly ready for deployment. The armor upgrades and weapon mounts are complete, and the communication system has passed its initial tests. Matthew nodded, his expression serious but pleased. Good. I want them inspected thoroughly before we deliver them to the military. No room for errors. Robert grinned faintly. When have we ever let anything leave this factory without triple-checking it? Never, Matthew said with a small smile, but with the stakes this high, I want us to be more meticulous than ever. These vehicles aren't just machinists, they're part of a larger strategy to reshape how wars are fought. Robert handed Matthew a clipboard. Here are the details on the first batch: 5 armored reconnaissance vehicles with mounted machine guns and wireless transmitters. The next batch will focus on troop transport vehicles with similar upgrades. Matthew skimmed the report, his eyes scanning the specifications. Excellent. Let's prepare for a final test run tomorrow morning. I want the military to see these vehicles in action before they take them to the front. The following morning, a small group of generals, including Warner and Caldwell, gathered at a secluded testing ground outside Sylvania. Matthew stood near the edge of the field, gesturing toward the sleek, modified vehicles parked nearby. Gentlemen, Matthew began, his voice carrying over the hum of idling engines. What you're about to see is the culmination of weeks of effort and innovation. These vehicles are not just tools, they're the backbone of a new era in warfare. Warner nodded, his arms crossed as he studied the vehicles. Let's see what they can do. Matthew signaled to the drivers, and the first vehicle roared to life. It sped across the field with surprising agility, weaving between obstacles and maintaining its balance on uneven terrain. The mounted machine guns swung into action, firing controlled bursts at targets positioned across the range. Each shot struck with precision, the power of the weapon evident even from a distance. The second vehicle demonstrated its wireless communication system. A technician inside the vehicle sent a message to a receiver stationed near the generals. The light on the receiver flashed, followed by a clear Morse code message. Message received, moving to next target. Caldwell leaned toward Warner. That's a game changer. Instant communication, even on the move. The final demonstration involved a convoy formation. 3 vehicles advanced together, their drivers coordinating movements seamlessly. The lead vehicle provided reconnaissance, scanning for threats, while the others followed, protecting a mock supply wagon in their midst. The convoy navigated the field efficiently, completing the course in record time. When the demonstration ended, Warner approached Matthew, his expression a mix of approval and determination. You've impressed us again, Hesh. These vehicles will give us an edge, no doubt about it, but we need to scale production quickly. The front lines are expanding, and our forces need these innovations yesterday. Matthew nodded. We're already ramping up production. I'll ensure the first wave of vehicles reaches your troops within the week. Caldwell stepped forward, his tone pragmatic. One concern, though: fuel and maintenance. These machines are impressive, but they're only as effective as the supply chains supporting them. Find more to read on Novelbin. Matthew had anticipated this. You're right, General, we're working on portable repair kits and fuel logistics to address these issues. I'll also send mechanics to the front to train your men on proper upkeep. Warner clapped Matthew on the shoulder. Good. Keep pushing forward. The Republic is counting on you. Back at the factory, Matthew gathered his senior staff in the main conference room. The mood was focused, the air charged with purpose. All right, Matthew began, pacing as he spoke. The military is on board. They've seen what these vehicles can do, and now it's up to us to deliver. I want production running at full capacity. No delays, no excuses. One of the engineers, a young man named Don, raised his hand. Mr. Hesh, what about the wireless communication systems? Are we prioritizing those as well? Absolutely, Matthew replied. The communication systems are just as important as the vehicles themselves. Every unit we produce must include a fully functional transmitter. Coordination is key to maximizing their effectiveness. Robert chimed in. We'll need more manpower to meet these demands. The current team is good, but they're stretched thin. Then hire more, Matthew said firmly. Skilled mechanics, engineers, anyone who can contribute. Pay them well and make it clear that this is critical work. As the meeting continued, plans were made to expand the workforce, streamline production, and implement additional quality checks. Matthew's team worked tirelessly, driven by his vision and the knowledge that their efforts could change the course of the war. By the end of the week, the first shipment of modified vehicles was loaded onto trains bound for the southern front. Matthew stood on the platform, watching as the carriages rumbled away. Their contents secured under heavy tarps. Robert joined him, his hands in his pockets. "You think they're ready for this?" "They have to be," Matthew said quietly. "This war isn't going to wait for us to perfect everything, but I believe in what we've built. These vehicles will make a difference, and in this war where they will prove themselves." As the train disappeared into the horizon, Matthew turned back toward the factory. There was still much to dom or innovations to develop, more challenges to overcome, but for now, he allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The Republic was armed with tools it had never possessed before, and Matthew Hesh was determined to see them used to their full potential. Chapter 94. Matthew Hesh's office was a hub of relentless activity. Engineers and assistants moved in and out, delivering updates and technical reports. The factory ran at full capacity, the assembly lines churning out vehicles and weapons destined for the southern front. Matthew sat at his desk, his brow furrowed as he sifted through the latest production logs. Despite the progress, bottlenecks persisted, and with the war escalating, he knew there was no room for error. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Robert Anders entered, his expression a mix of urgency and excitement. "Matthew, you need to see this," Robert said, holding up a telegram. Matthew took the paper and scanned it quickly. It was from General Warner, reporting a major victory in the southern campaign. The modified vehicles and wireless telegram systems had played a pivotal role in driving Mexican forces from a critical stronghold. Continue reading on Novelbin. Calm, tactical superiority achieved through coordinated use of vehicles and communication. Matthew read aloud. He set the telegram down and leaned back in his chair. "This is encouraging. It proves we're moving in the right direction." Robert nodded. "More than that, the generals are requesting additional units, specifically vehicles with reinforced armor and upgraded weapons. They need them as soon as possible." Matthew stood, his mind already racing. "Then we'll make it happen. Get Don and the design team. We're going to push these machines even further." The design team assembled in the conference room, blueprints and notes spread across the table. Don Kessler, the lead engineer, stood at the front, a prototype sketch pinned to the wall behind him. "We've received detailed feedback from the front lines," Don began. "The current armor works well, but the generals want it thicker to withstand heavy firepower. They've also requested mounted cannons for stronger offensive capabilities." Matthew leaned forward, studying the sketch intently. "What about speed? If we increase the armor and add cannons, we risk slowing the vehicles down." Don nodded. "That's the challenge. We'll need to reinforce the chassis and upgrade the engines to handle the added weight. It'll increase fuel consumption, though." "We can manage fuel," Matthew said firmly. "But we can't lose speed. Agility is just as important as protection. Look into lightweight alloys and more efficient engines." Robert chimed in. "And the communication systems? Should we upgrade those as well?" "Yes," Matthew replied without hesitation. "The wireless telegram systems are proving essential. Let's refine the design, make them more compact and durable. If these vehicles are leading assaults, their communication must be flawless." The team dove into brainstorming, sketching designs, and debating solutions. Matthew moved among them, offering input and ensuring no detail was overlooked. Hours passed, but the energy in the room remained high. By the end of the day, they had a new blueprint of vehicle designed to be faster, stronger, and deadlier than its predecessors. The next morning, Matthew stood on the factory floor as production began on the upgraded vehicles. The hum of machinery and the clatter of tools filled the air, as workers assembled reinforced chassis and installed the upgraded weapon systems. Don and his engineers monitored every step, double-checking the assembly process to ensure precision. "Mr. Hesh," a foreman called out, jogging over with a clipboard in hand. "We've hit a snag. The lightweight alloys you requested are in short supply." Matthew frowned. "How short?" "Enough to slow production if we can't source more." Matthew considered the situation, then turned to Robert. "Contact our suppliers. Offer them a premium to expedite shipments. If that doesn't work, start sourcing new suppliers. Whatever it takes, we can't afford delays." Robert nodded and left to make the arrangements. Matthew returned to overseeing the production line, his focus unwavering. A week later, the first batch of upgraded vehicles rolled off the assembly line. Matthew and his team conducted rigorous tests, pushing the machines to their limits. The reinforced armor withstood sustained fire, the mounted cannons proved devastating, and the improved wireless telegram systems delivered flawless communication. "These will do," Matthew said, watching a driver maneuver one of the vehicles through an obstacle course. "Send word to the generals. Their reinforcements are ready." At the southern front, the upgraded vehicles quickly proved their worth. Reports poured in from commanders describing Mexican defenses crumbling under the combined assault of armored convoys and coordinated infantry. The wireless telegram systems allowed units to adapt their strategies in real time, outmaneuvering the enemy at every turn. In one key engagement, an Amarathian convoy used the new vehicles to smash through a heavily fortified position. The mounted cannons destroyed key defensive emplacements, while the reinforced armor withstood a barrage of musket fire and artillery shells. By the time the infantry advanced, the battle was already decided back in Sylvania. Matthew read the after-action reports with a mix of pride and determination. His innovations were shaping the war's outcome, but he knew there was no time to rest. One evening, as Matthew worked late in his office, Robert entered holding another telegram. The envelope was marked urgent. "This just came in," Robert said, handing it over. "It's from General Warner. He's requesting a meeting to discuss the next phase of the war." Matthew opened the telegram and scanned its contents. Warner's tone was clear. The stakes were higher than ever, and the generals were looking to Hesh Industries for the next breakthrough. Matthew set the telegram down and nodded. "I'll go and meet them first thing tomorrow. If they're counting on us, we need to be prepared to deliver." Robert straightened. "I'll arrange your transport and have the latest production reports ready for the meeting." Matthew stood, his mind already turning over the possibilities. "Make sure Dawn is available to oversee things here while I'm gone. If the generals want breakthroughs, they'll get them, but the factory has to keep running smoothly in my absence." Robert gave a brisk nod before leaving the room. Matthew glanced at the blueprints spread across his desk one last time, then turned to the window in his mind. He was thinking of what to introduce next. Chapter 95. The morning was crisp, with a light mist rolling across the cobbled streets of Sylvania as Matthew Hesh stepped out of his automobile. The War Ministry loomed ahead. Its imposing stone facade adorned with banners of the Grand Republic soldiers stood at attention near the entrance, their polished boots gleaming in the pale sunlight inside. The atmosphere was one of tense urgency. Staff officers moved briskly through the corridors, clutching papers and exchanging clipped conversations. Matthew adjusted his coat and followed an aide who had been sent to escort him to the conference room. As he entered, the room quieted. Seated at the long table were some of the most powerful military figures in the Republic. General Nathaniel Warner was at the head, flanked by General Henry Caldwell and Brigadier General Samuel Grant. Maps, reports, and sketches cluttered the table, a testament to the scale of planning underway. "Mr. Hesh," Warner greeted him, standing to shake his hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Matthew took the offered seat, setting his briefcase on the table. "General Warner, it's always a privilege to support the Republic. What's the latest situation?" Warner gestured to the map in front of him, which displayed the contested southern territories. "The campaign is progressing, but we've encountered stiffer resistance in certain areas. The Mexican forces are digging in, fortifying key positions, and we need a strategy to break through without incurring heavy losses." Brigadier General Grant leaned forward. "Your vehicles and wireless telegram systems have been invaluable. They've given us the edge we needed in mobility and communication, but the enemy is adapting. Their artillery is becoming more accurate, and they've begun targeting our vehicles specifically." Matthew absorbed the information, his mind racing. "You're saying they're focusing on countering the vehicles? Have you seen damage patterns or specific tactics?" Caldwell slid a report across the table. We've analyzed recent engagements. They're using concentrated artillery fire and explosives to disable the vehicles before engaging our infantry. While the armor holds up under most circumstances, sustained fire eventually breaches it. Matthew frowned, flipping through the report. It seems they're exploiting gaps in our tactics, not just the machines. If we keep using the vehicles the same way, we're giving them predictable targets. Warner nodded. That's why we called you here. We need solutions, not just improvements to the vehicles, but changes in how we deploy them. Matthew leaned back, his expression thoughtful. First, let's address the vehicles. We can reinforce the armor further and add deflection angles to reduce the impact of artillery hits. Additionally, I propose developing a smoke deployment system, something the vehicles can use to obscure themselves during an assault. Grant raised an eyebrow. Smoke deployment? Explain. Matthew opened his briefcase and pulled out a rough sketch. It's a simple concept. A canister releases a dense, non-toxic smoke that spreads quickly, providing cover for both the vehicle and nearby troops. It's not foolproof, but it can disrupt enemy targeting and give our forces the element of surprise. Caldwell nodded slowly. That could work. It would also give the infantry more protection during advances. Matthew continued, Second, we need to rethink how we use the vehicles. Instead of sending them in as straightforward assault units, let's create specialized roles. Some vehicles should focus on transporting troops quickly to strategic locations, others could be equipped with heavy artillery for long-range support, and lighter models could serve as fast reconnaissance units, gathering intelligence and harassing the enemy's flanks. Warner exchanged a glance with Caldwell and Grant. Specialized roles that would require significant adjustments to our current strategy. Yes, Matthew agreed. But it would make our forces more versatile right now. We're treating these machines like advanced wagons. They have the potential to be so much more tools for mobility, firepower, and adaptability. Grant stroked his chin. And the wireless telegram systems? Can they be integrated further? Absolutely, Matthew said. I'm already working on more compact and rugged designs. These can be mounted on vehicles, allowing real-time communication between units. Imagine a convoy receiving updated orders mid-battle or coordinating an ambush across multiple fronts. Explore stories on Novelbin. Warner tapped his fingers on the table, considering the proposal. That kind of coordination could be a game-changer. But what about the infantry? They're still using standard formations and tactics. How do we ensure they're not left behind as the vehicles evolve? Matthew smiled faintly. You raise an excellent point, General. We need to train the infantry to work in tandem with the vehicles. Think of it as a symbiotic relationship, infantry protecting the vehicles from close-range threats while the vehicles provide cover, and firepower drills and war games can help integrate these tactics. Warner stood, pacing the room as he spoke. Your proposals are bold, Hesh, but they're not without challenges. Adjusting our strategy, producing new designs, and retraining the troops will take time, and time is something we're running out of. Matthew stood as well. His gaze steady. I understand, General, but the cost of not adapting is far greater. Every day we hesitate, the enemy learns more about us. If we want to maintain our advantage, we must evolve faster than they can respond. The room fell silent, the weight of Matthew's words sinking in. Finally, Warner nodded. You're right. Well, implement your ideas, but I need prototypes of the modified vehicles within a month and training programs drafted immediately. You'll have them, Matthew said confidently. I'll return to the factory today and begin work. Warner extended his hand. Then we'll hold you to that, Hesh. The Republic is counting on you. Matthew shook his hand firmly, then gathered his papers and briefcase. As he left the War Ministry, his mind was already racing with plans. The road ahead would be demanding, but he was determined to meet the challenge head-on. Back at the factory, Matthew wasted no time. He convened his team, outlining the new requirements and assigning tasks. Engineers began drafting blueprints for the upgraded vehicles, while trainers started developing programs to teach infantry vehicle coordination. From this war alone, Matthew Hesh was generating copious amounts of florin from the government contracts alone. Though he wished the war would end soon, as he could focus on other enterprises and not focus solely on developing the technological tree in the field of war technology. Chapter 96. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and gunpowder as the Grand Republic's forces pushed deeper into Mexican territory. Lieutenant Andrew Hayes stood atop a ridgeline overlooking the sprawling plains below. The remnants of a Mexican battalion were retreating in disarray, their once disciplined ranks shattered by the relentless assault of the Amorathian war machine. Behind Hayes, a convoy of armored vehicles rumbled forward, their reinforced plating glinting under the harsh midday sun. Mounted cannons swiveled, scanning the horizon for any sign of resistance. Infantry followed closely, their bolt-action rifles at the ready, their movements disciplined and precise. Hayes lowered his binoculars, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and weariness. "Caldwell," he called, his voice carrying over the din of machinery and marching boots. Sergeant Caldwell jogged up to him, his uniform dusted with grime. "Yes, sir." "Send word to the artillery, we need a full barrage on those ridges to the south, cut off their retreat and force them into the valley." Caldwell nodded and hurried off to relay the orders. Moments later, the thunderous boom of artillery echoed across the landscape. Explosions rippled along the ridgeline, sending plumes of dirt and debris skyward. The Mexican forces below faltered, their retreat turning into chaos. In the War Ministry back in Sylvania, General Nathaniel Warner reviewed the latest battlefield reports. His office was filled with maps, reports, and telegrams, each one a testament to the rapid collapse of the United States of Mexico's resistance. He rubbed his temples, the weight of command evident in his posture. A sharp knock at the door broke his concentration. "Enter," Warner said gruffly. Matthew Hesh stepped in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Despite the long hours he had spent at the factory, his suit was immaculate and his expression sharp. "Mr. Hesh," Warner said, gesturing for him to sit, "you've seen the reports?" Matthew nodded, setting a folder on the desk. "I have. It's clear the technological gap is taking its toll. The Mexican forces can't keep up with the pace of our advances." Warner leaned back in his chair. "The vehicles, the wireless telegrams, the rifles, it's all working better than we could have hoped, but there's still resistance, especially in the southern cities. They're digging in, and it's slowing our progress." Matthew opened the folder, revealing blueprints and schematics. "I anticipated this. I've been working on modifications to the existing vehicles, plow attachments to clear obstacles, reinforced treads for navigating urban terrain, and flamethrower systems for close-quarters engagements. These enhancements will make urban assaults more efficient." Warner studied the designs, his eyes narrowing. "Flamethrowers? That's a grim weapon." "It's a grim war," Matthew replied evenly. "If we want to minimize our losses, we need tools that can break their defenses quickly and decisively." Warner nodded reluctantly. "Very well. How soon can these modifications be implemented?" "Production can start immediately," Matthew said. "The first units will be ready within a week." Warner stood, extending his hand. "You've done more for this war effort than we could have imagined, Hesh. If these new designs work as intended, this war might end sooner than we think." Matthew shook his hand firmly. "That's the goal, General." At the southern front, the modified vehicles rolled into action. The streets of San Marcos, one of the last major Mexican strongholds, were narrow and cluttered with makeshift barricades. Mexican soldiers fired from rooftops and windows, their resistance fierce despite the odds. The first wave of Amorathian vehicles advanced cautiously, their mounted cannons clearing the barricades with precise fire. A flamethrower-equipped vehicle led the charge, its jets of fire flushing defenders out of entrenched positions. Infantry followed closely, moving methodically through the rubble-strewn streets. Lieutenant Hayes coordinated the assault from a forward command post, the wireless telegram system allowing him to issue orders in real time. "Sector A cleared," came a report from one unit moving to Sector B. Hayes relayed the information to his superiors, his confidence growing with each success. The battle for San Marcos was brutal, but the outcome was never in doubt. By nightfall, the city was under Amorathian control. Back in Sylvania, the news of the victory in San Marcos spread quickly. Crowds gathered in the streets, waving flags and cheering as the bells of the city's churches rang out in celebration. In his office, Matthew read the telegrams with a sense of relief. The end of the war was in sight, but he knew there was still work to be done. Robert Anders entered, holding a fresh report. "Matthew, the generals are calling this the beginning of the end. They're planning a final push to the capital." Matthew set the report down and leaned back in his chair. "Then we need to ensure they have everything they need. No delays, no mistakes." Robert nodded. "Understood. He'll double-check the supply lines and production schedules." As Robert left, Matthew turned to the blueprints on his desk. He felt a mix of pride and weariness. The war had pushed the limits of innovation and manufacturing, but it had also taken a toll on the soldiers, on the nation, and on himself. He gazed out the window, the city's skyline silhouetted against the evening sky. The war had brought immense profit to Hesh Industries, but Matthew knew that peace would bring its own challenges. For now, though, his focus remained on ensuring victory at the Front lines, the Amorathian forces prepared for the final push. The capital of the United States of Mexico loomed ahead, its defenses formidable but its morale crumbling. The technological superiority of the Grand Republic had turned the tide decisively, and the Mexican forces knew they were outmatched. Lieutenant Hayes stood with his men, the rising sun casting a golden light over the battlefield. "This is it, gentlemen," he said, his voice steady. "One last push and we end this war." The soldiers nodded, their resolve unshaken. The sound of engines roared to life as the armored vehicles rolled forward, leading the charge into the heart of the enemy's defenses. The final battle was about to begin. Chapter 97. The air was heavy with tension as the Amorathian forces prepared for their final assault on the Mexican capital. The sprawling city of Nueva Libertad lay ahead, its skyline dominated by ancient churches and government buildings. Beneath the veneer of its majestic architecture, the city had become a fortress. Barricades lined the main avenues, artillery emplacements covered key choke points, and thousands of Mexican soldiers stood ready for a last stand. Lieutenant Andrew Hayes surveyed the battlefield from his forward command post, his sharp eyes scanning the distant defenses. Smoke from scattered skirmishes hung low over the horizon, a grim reminder of the battles that had led them here. "Caldwell," Hayes called out, his voice cutting through the hum of preparation. Sergeant Caldwell stepped forward, saluting briskly. "Yes, sir." "Status on the vehicles?" "They're in position, Lieutenant," Caldwell replied. "The modified units are ready to breach the outer defenses. Flamethrowers and mounted cannons have been prepped, and the wireless telegram systems are operational." Hayes nodded, his face set in determination. "Good, signal the artillery to begin the bombardment. We need to soften them up before the assault." Caldwell moved swiftly to relay the orders moments later. The thunder of artillery echoed across the plains as shells arced through the sky, landing with devastating precision on the city's outskirts. Explosions erupted along the defensive lines, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. In the heart of Nueva Libertad, Colonel Javier Ortega stood amidst the chaos, barking orders to his beleaguered officers. The once proud commander had seen his forces battered by the relentless Amorathian advance, and now he faced the impossible task of holding the capital against a technologically superior foe. "Reinforce the eastern barricades," Ortega shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "And for God's sake, keep the artillery firing. We cannot let them breach the perimeter." An officer hesitated, his face pale. "Colonel, the men are exhausted, supplies are running low, and then find more," Ortega snapped, his voice trembling with frustration. "We cannot fail here. This city is the last bastion of our resistance." The officer nodded grimly and left to carry out the orders. Ortega turned to the map spread across the table, his mind racing. He knew the odds were against them, but surrender was unthinkable. As the artillery bombardment subsided, the Amorathian vehicles roared to life. Their engines growled like angry beasts as they surged forward, a wall of steel and firepower advancing toward the city. Flamethrower-equipped units led the charge, their jets of fire clearing barricades and flushing out entrenched defenders behind them. Infantry moved in disciplined formations, their bolt-action rifles at the ready. The Mexican defenders fought valiantly, their muskets and cannons blazing in desperate defiance. But their outdated weapons were no match for the precision and firepower of the Amorathian forces. Bullets ricocheted harmlessly off the reinforced armor of the vehicles, while their mounted cannons reduced defensive emplacements to rubble. Lieutenant Hayes advanced with his men, his wireless telegram system crackling with updates from the front. "Sector Alpha cleared," came one report. "Moving on Sector Bravo." Hayes relayed the information to his units, coordinating the assault with surgical precision. "Keep the pressure on," he ordered. "Don't give them a moment to regroup." In the eastern sector, an Amorathian convoy broke through a heavily fortified checkpoint. The flamethrowers created a wall of fire, driving the defenders into the open, where they were picked off by sharpshooters. The mounted cannons targeted artillery emplacements, silencing the Mexican guns that had once dominated the battlefield. As the day wore on, the Amorathian forces pushed deeper into the city. The streets became a maze of narrow alleys and towering buildings, each corner hiding potential threats. Hayes knew the dangers of urban warfare but trusted in the discipline and training of his troops. "Recon units, take point," Hayes commanded, his voice steady over the wireless system. Watch for ambushes and report any resistance. The recon vehicles moved ahead, their lighter frames allowing them to navigate the tight streets with ease. Their mounted machine guns provided covering fire as the infantry advanced behind the Mexican defenders attempted to regroup. But their efforts were swiftly thwarted by the coordinated assault in the central plaza. Colonel Ortega made his final stand surrounded by his remaining men. He vowed to fight to the last, but as the Amorathian forces closed in, the reality of their situation became clear. The plaza erupted in chaos as the first Amorathian vehicles rolled in. Their cannons shattering the makeshift barricades, infantry stormed the square, their rifles blazing. The Mexicans fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outgunned. Within minutes, the resistance crumbled, and Ortega was captured. By nightfall, the city was under Amorathian control. The Mexican flag was lowered from the Capitol building, replaced by the banner of the Grand Republic. Soldiers cheered as the news spread. The war was all but over. In his command post, Lieutenant Hayes received the confirmation. "It's done," he said quietly, the weight of the moment sinking in. Caldwell approached, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "They're calling it a decisive victory. The Mexican government has signaled its intention to negotiate terms of surrender." Hayes nodded, his gaze distant. "Good, it's time to end this." Back in Sylvania, the streets erupted in celebration as news of the victory reached the capital. Bells rang, crowds gathered, and the air was filled with the sounds of triumph. At Hesh Industries, Matthew read the telegrams with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Robert Anders entered, a rare smile on his face. "Matthew, it's over, the Republic has won." Matthew set the telegram down and stood, his expression calm. "Then it's time to focus on rebuilding. The war may be over, but our work is just beginning." As the factory hummed with activity, Matthew began drafting plans for the future. The innovations born from the war had proven their worth, but now they would be repurposed for peace. For Matthew, the end of the war marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by destruction, but by progress. Chapter 98. Matthew Hesh leaned back in his chair, staring at the telegram clutched in his hand. The message, sent directly from General Warner's office, confirmed what he had been waiting to hear: victory. The Grand Republic of Amorathia had secured total control over Nueva Libertad, forcing the United States of Mexico to the negotiating table. The war was over. For a moment, the factory's hum of machinery seemed distant. As if the world had slowed, Matthew's eyes scanned the terse, formal message again. Letting the weight of its words settle in, Robert Anders burst into the room, a broad grin splitting his face. "Matthew, have you heard? It's done. The Mexicans have surrendered." Matthew nodded, finally letting a smile creep onto his face. "I've just received the confirmation. It's over." Robert walked over and clasped his shoulder. "You did it. The vehicles, the weapons, the wireless telegrams, they were the difference. This victory belongs as much to Hesh Industries as it does to the Republic." Matthew stood, setting the telegram on his desk. "It's not just me, Robert. It's every worker, every engineer, every person who believed in what we were doing. This victory belongs to all of us." Robert's smile widened. "Then we should celebrate. Let the workers know it's time to stop and take pride in what we've accomplished." Within an hour, word spread across the factory floor. The machinery ground to a halt as workers gathered in the main assembly hall, their grease-streaked faces alight with curiosity and anticipation. Matthew climbed onto a raised platform, his tall figure silhouetted against the backdrop of towering equipment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Matthew began, his voice carrying over the murmurs, "today we've received news that the war is over. The Grand Republic of Amorathia has achieved victory." A cheer erupted, echoing through the vast hall. Workers clapped and whistled, some throwing their caps into the air. The atmosphere was electric, a collective release of tension and effort that had built over months of relentless work. Matthew raised his hands for silence, and the room quickly quieted. This victory wasn't just won on the battlefield, it was won here, in this factory. Every vehicle, every weapon, every innovation that left these walls played a part in securing the Republic's success. "You should all be proud because without you, this would not have been possible." The crowd roared again, the workers beaming with pride. For many, this moment was a validation of the countless hours they had poured into their craft. "And now," Matthew continued, his smile broadening, "we celebrate tonight. I want every single one of you to join me at the Iron Tap drinks. Food, music, it's all on me. You've earned it." That evening, the Iron Tap was transformed. The normally quiet tavern had been decorated with Amorathian flags and banners. Its tables laden with platters of food and pitchers of ale. Workers from the factory filled every corner, their laughter and cheers blending with the lively tunes of a fiddle player in the corner. Matthew stood near the bar, A mug of ale in his hand as he greeted his employees, Robert joined him, holding his own drink. "You know," Robert said, gesturing to the bustling crowd, "I've never seen them this happy." "They deserve it," Matthew replied, taking a sip. "They've worked harder than anyone could have asked for. Tonight is for them." Don Kessler, the lead engineer, approached with a wide grin. "Matthew, I have to say, this feels damn good seeing everyone here. Knowing what we've accomplished, it's something else." Matthew clinked his mug against Don's. "It's not every day you help change the course of history. Enjoy it." The celebration grew as the night wore on. Workers swapped stories of their time in the factory. Engineers shared tales of overcoming challenges, and everyone raised their glasses to the Republic's victory. Matthew moved among them, shaking hands, sharing laughs, and listening to their stories. At one point, Robert stood on a table, calling for everyone's attention. "A toast?" he declared, raising his mug high, "to Matthew Hesh, a man who not only gave us the tools to win this war, but showed us what true innovation and leadership look like. To Matthew! To Matthew!" The crowd echoed, their mugs clinking together in a symphony of celebration. Matthew felt a flush of pride but quickly deflected the praise. "And to all of you," he said, raising his own mug, "because none of this would have been possible without your hard work and dedication to us." "To us!" The workers cheered, their spirits soaring. As the celebration continued, Matthew found a moment of quiet near the back of the tavern. He stood by a window, looking out at the darkened streets of Sylvania. The war was over, and the Republic was safe. But Matthew knew this was only the beginning. Robert joined him, a fresh mug in hand. "You look deep in thought. Can't let yourself enjoy the moment?" Matthew chuckled softly. "I am enjoying it, but I can't help thinking about what comes next. The war is over, but there's so much more we can do. These innovations, they don't have to be for war. Imagine what they could mean for industry, for transportation, for communication." Robert nodded, his expression serious. "You're right. This is a turning point, not just for the Republic, but for the world, and you're at the center of it." Matthew turned to him, his gaze steady. "Then let's make sure we use it wisely. If we've proven anything, it's that innovation can change the course of history. Now it's time to change it for the better." Robert raised his mug in agreement. "To the future." "To the future?" Matthew echoed, clinking his mug against Robert's. As the night wore on, the sounds of celebration filled the air, a testament to the spirit of those who had worked tirelessly to achieve something extraordinary. And amidst the laughter and cheers, Matthew Hesh stood at the heart of it all, quietly determined to shape the world that lay ahead. Chapter 99. Matthew Hesh adjusted the cuffs of his tailored coat as he ascended the steps of the War Ministry. The aftermath of victory brought not just relief but recognition, and today, the nation's military leaders had summoned him for a meeting. While the war was over, the implications of his contributions were only beginning to unfold. Inside the grand conference room, familiar faces awaited him. General Nathaniel Warner stood at the head of the table, his imposing presence as commanding as ever. To his right sat General Henry Caldwell, whose logistical acumen had been instrumental in the campaign, and Brigadier General Samuel Grant, the tactician who had orchestrated many of the Republic's victories. Several other high-ranking officers were also present, their expressions a mix of respect and satisfaction. "Mr. Hesh," Warner greeted, rising to shake his hand. "Welcome, please take a seat." Matthew nodded and sat at the designated chair, setting his briefcase beside him. "Generals, it's an honor to be here." Warner gestured to a stack of documents on the table. "The honor is ours. Your innovations didn't just contribute to our victory, they defined it. The rifles, the vehicles, the wireless telegram systems. Without Hesh Industries, this war could have dragged on for years with far greater losses." Grant leaned forward, his tone earnest. "Your technologies changed everything, Hesh. The enemy was outmatched at every turn. Their tactics couldn't evolve quickly enough to counter what you provided us." Caldwell chimed in, "From logistics to frontline combat, your contributions weren't just tools, they were strategic assets. The wireless telegram systems alone saved countless lives by allowing us to coordinate in real time." Matthew inclined his head, acknowledging their praise. "I'm glad Hesh Industries could play a role, but victory isn't just about technology, it's about the men and women who wielded it with courage and skill. They deserve just as much credit." Warner smiled faintly, spoken like a true patriot. That humility is admirable, Mr. Hesh, but make no mistake, your contributions deserve recognition. That's why we've called you here today. Matthew's interest peaked as Warner opened a folder revealing a series of documents stamped with official seals. Your next chapter is on novelbin.com. The Republic owes you a great debt, Warner continued, and we intend to repay it. Effective immediately, Hesh Industries will receive exclusive government contracts for military development. Matthew leaned forward slightly. Exclusive contracts? Grant nodded. That's right. For the foreseeable future, no other company will be considered for the development of weapons, vehicles, or communication systems for the Grand Republic. You'll have full control over innovation in these sectors. Caldwell added, and that's just the beginning. These contracts will come with substantial financial backing, far exceeding what you've received so far. You'll have the resources to expand your operations and invest in research and development. Matthew processed the implications. Exclusive contracts meant guaranteed revenue streams and the elimination of competition in a highly lucrative sector. The financial boost alone would solidify Hesh Industries as a cornerstone of the Republic's defense infrastructure. There's more, Warner said, flipping to another document. We've also arranged for significant tax exemptions for the next decade. Hesh Industries will be exempt from certain manufacturing taxes and tariffs on imported materials. This will allow you to maximize profits and reinvest in your business. Matthew raised an eyebrow. Tax exemptions were rare and highly coveted, effectively increasing his margins without requiring additional output. The benefits would ripple across every aspect of his operations. And then there's the land grants. Caldwell interjected, the government is allocating parcels of land near strategic locations, ports, rail hubs, and industrial centers for Hesh Industries to build additional factories or research facilities. These properties will be transferred to you at no cost. Matthew's mind raced. Land grants near vital infrastructure would drastically reduce logistics costs and enable faster production and distribution. The potential for growth was staggering. As for kickbacks, Grant said, his tone measured. You'll receive a percentage of any savings the Republic achieves through the use of your innovations. For instance, the wireless telegram systems have already reduced operational costs by streamlining communication. You'll receive a share of those savings as part of our ongoing partnership. Matthew steepled his fingers, his analytical mind assessing the sheer scope of the offer. Exclusive contracts, tax exemptions, land grants, and kickbacks. It wasn't just recognition, it was a transformative opportunity. This is generous, Matthew said finally, his tone even. But what's the expectation? I assume the Republic will need more than just gratitude in return. Warner leaned back, his expression serious but not unkind. Our expectation, Mr. Hesh, is that you continue to innovate. The world is changing and we must stay ahead. Your company will remain at the forefront of technological advancement, not just for war, but for industry and infrastructure as well. Caldwell nodded. The Republic is entering a new era. Railroads, factories, communication networks, these will be just as critical to our future as our military. We want Hesh Industries to lead that charge. Matthew considered their words. The offer wasn't without strings, but it aligned with his own vision. He had always seen his innovations as tools for progress, not just conflict. Grant spoke up, his tone lighter, and, of course, there's one more benefit we haven't mentioned. You'll have the gratitude and protection of the Republic. Your success ensures our strength, and that strength ensures your security. Matthew smiled faintly. A mutually beneficial arrangement, then. Warner extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? Matthew rose, clasping Warner's hand firmly. We do. The general smiled, visibly relieved. Warner gestured to a clerk in the corner, who stepped forward with a pen and a stack of documents. Sign these, Warner instructed. They formalize the terms of our agreement. Matthew reviewed the papers carefully, his legal training ensuring he missed no detail. Satisfied, he signed each page, solidifying the partnership between Hesh Industries and the Republic. As the meeting concluded, Warner stood. Mr. Hesh, on behalf of the Republic, thank you. Your contributions have not only secured our victory but also our future. Matthew inclined his head. And thank you, General. It's an honor to serve the Republic. As he left the War Ministry, Matthew felt a rare sense of accomplishment. The war had been won, but the real work was just beginning. With the resources and support now at his disposal, the possibilities were endless. Hesh Industries wasn't just a company, Anna Maria, it was a cornerstone of a nation's future, and Matthew Hesh was determined to make the most of it. Chapter 100. The evening sky over Sylvania was painted in hues of amber and violet as Matthew Hesh returned to his factory. The sprawling industrial complex hummed with activity, a testament to the relentless work ethic that had driven the Republic to victory. Tonight, however, the atmosphere felt different, charged with a sense of possibility and purpose. Matthews stepped into his office, where Robert Anders was waiting, a stack of papers and telegrams spread across the desk. The factory's operations manager looked up as Matthew entered, his expression a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Enjoy new chapters from Novelbin, well? Robert asked. How did the meeting go? Matthew removed his coat and hung it neatly on a rack. He sat down at his desk, his hands clasped together as he met Robert's gaze. It went better than I could have hoped. Hesh Industries has secured exclusive contracts for all future military developments. We're also getting tax exemptions, land grants near key infrastructure, and a percentage of the savings the Republic achieves through our innovations. Robert's eyes widened. That's extraordinary. Do you realize what this means? Matthew smiled faintly. I do, but it also means we have work to do. The Republic is counting on us to lead the way, not just in military technology but in shaping the future of industry and infrastructure. Robert nodded, already flipping through the papers in front of him. I've been reviewing the reports from the front lines. The upgraded vehicles and wireless systems were a turning point. The generals are already asking about what's next. That's exactly what we need to figure out, Matthew said, leaning forward. The war may be over, but the competition isn't. Other nations will see what we've done, and they'll try to catch up. We need to stay ahead, both for the Republic and for ourselves. Robert hesitated for a moment, then spoke cautiously. Matthew, with these new contracts and benefits, we're poised to become the most influential company in the Republic. But there's a danger in growing too quickly. We'll need to manage this expansion carefully. Matthew appreciated Robert's pragmatism. You're right, growth without structure leads to collapse. That's why we'll expand in phases, starting with the land grants. Robert pulled out a map and spread it across the desk. The parcels of land allocated by the government were marked in red, strategically located near railroads, ports, and rivers. These locations are ideal, Robert said, tapping one of the marks near a major port. This one, in particular, would be perfect for a manufacturing hub. We could produce not just military vehicles but also commercial ones, trucks, automobiles, even agricultural equipment. Matthew studied the map, his mind already visualizing the possibilities. Agreed, start drafting plans for a new factory there, and let's explore partnerships with local suppliers and contractors. Building goodwill in these regions will strengthen our position. Robert made a note. What about the other sites? The one near the rail hub, Matthew said, pointing to another mark. That'll be our research and development center. We'll need state-of-the-art facilities to experiment with new materials, engines, and technologies. Robert nodded. And the third site? That one, Matthew said, his tone thoughtful, will be our logistics hub. With the rail and road connections there, we can streamline distribution across the Republic. Every vehicle, weapon, and component will pass through that facility. Robert scribbled furiously in his notebook. He'll coordinate with the architects and engineers. We'll need detailed blueprints and cost estimates. Good, Matthew said, and while you're at it, reach out to the universities. We'll need the brightest minds for our R&D center, offer scholarships, internships, whatever it takes to attract talent. Robert raised an eyebrow. You're thinking long-term. In thinking survival, Matthew said simply, the Republic's victory has made us a target. If we don't innovate, someone else will. Robert leaned back, his expression contemplative. What about the public perception? With all this growth, there's bound to be scrutiny. People might question why one company is getting so much government support. Matthew's jaw tightened. Well, address that with transparency, publicize the benefits our technologies have brought, not just in war but in everyday life. Highlight how we're creating jobs, boosting local economies, and advancing the nation. Robert smiled faintly. You've thought of everything. Matthew shook his head. Not everything, but enough to keep us moving forward. As Robert left to begin the preparations, Matthew turned his attention to the stack of reports on his desk. Each one detailed a different aspect of the company's operations, from production schedules to resource allocations. The scale of the enterprise was staggering, but Matthew thrived on the challenge. A knock at the door drew his attention. Don Kessler, the lead engineer, stepped in, carrying a blueprint tube and a look of quiet excitement. Sir Hesh, Don began, unrolling the blueprint on the desk. I've been working on something I think you'll find interesting. Matthew leaned over the table, his eyes scanning the intricate design. It was a concept for a modular vehicle, one that could be adapted for different roles by swapping out components. This, Don said, pointing to the blueprint, could revolutionize how we approach manufacturing. Instead of building separate models for transport, reconnaissance, and combat, we build a single base chassis. The end user decides the configuration based on their needs. Matthew's eyes lit up. He didn't expect one of his personnel could make something revolutionary. That's brilliant. It simplifies production and reduces costs. Have you tested the concept? Not yet, Don admitted, but with the new RD center, we could make this a priority. Matthew nodded. Let's do it. This could be the next big leap for Hesh Industries. As the evening wore on, Matthew continued reviewing plans and coordinating with his team. The victory celebrations had passed, but his focus remained on the future. The war had proven what was possible. But it was only the beginning. By the time the factory's lights dimmed for the night, Matthew sat alone in his office, staring out at the city skyline. The Republic's banners still hung from buildings, fluttering gently in the breeze. The people saw victory, hope, and progress for Matthew. They also represented responsibility. Hesh Industries wasn't just a business, Anna Marie, it was a force for change. And Matthew Hesh was determined to ensure that change was for the better.